Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. I want to welcome you to our presentation. It's 11 a.m. here on the West Coast. My name is Craig Todd. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at Indicee. And we're going to spend the next hour talking about the Indicee library and more of the point, sort of look at this from a how-to kind of guide, why should I kind of guide, what is it about an Indicee library that is pivotal or critical to the success of using the Indicee BI framework and our BI system. So just from a logistical standpoint, if you're new to the GoToMeeting system, there is a question panel that appears on your toolbox or your GoToMeeting or rather GoToWebinar toolbar. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to go ahead and click on that and type them in. Hopefully we'll have enough time at the end to stop and deal with some Q&A and get your questions answered. Certainly I encourage you to contact me directly or offline as well if you like. I'll put my email address up at the end of the presentation. And if you have any further questions, as I said, we'll bring them back up at the end. Don't hesitate to use that question panel, and then hopefully we can have a little discussion further on down the road. So just a little agenda. I'll tell you a little bit about who Indicee is. We'll do an overview of the Indicee product, the Indicee platform. So we'll talk about the platform itself. We'll talk about some library concepts. We'll put you through the paces of actually designing a library, and then talk a little bit about the question I get asked a lot is, how do I get my data into Indicee? How do we load this up? How do we provision it? How do we keep it running? That sort of idea. And then time permitting, we'll do a product demonstration. There's a lot of content to cover. And it is certainly of a technical nature, and so hopefully we'll get through it in the time provided. And if, as I said, if time permits at the end, we'll do a live product demonstration. I'll actually build a very small working library for you and show you how that functions. So if you're new to Indicee and new to speaking with us, most of us here have a long history in the BI industry. I would suggest probably a good majority of the company coming out of the Crystal and Business Objects product lines, going back to, it's actually some of the very early days of Crystal. The simple history of the company goes back to a local company called the Cunningham Group, and they've served as an incubator for some high-tech startups over the years. Crystal was certainly one of them, and so our CEO, Mark Cunningham, was part of that team. Our CTO was the chief research scientist for Crystal Business Objects over the years as it went through its growth and acquisitions. And then going on down the line, many here working in various capacities in those organizations. A very, very long history in business intelligence. And, if anything, we learned what we did wrong. We learned what we did right. We hope to take that sort of 20-year history and bring it forward into new and innovative ways to look at business intelligence. And that's really what brought us to Indicee and really brought us to form Indicee. Our goal, create a complete BI solution that's cloud-based so people can deploy rapidly, get instant value of it, immediate results, and deliver it to a much broader audience than we ever did before. And that's always been the challenge with reporting, visualization, graphics, data in general. The whole BI industry was that, generally speaking, the tools have been too hard for people to use over the years, and we continue to work at different ways to make developing these BI systems and BI solutions a lot easier for the end user. So that's Indicee. As a BI system, we have a variety of different working parts or moving parts, working components, however you want to slice it up. Data visualization, obviously, is the most noticeable part of any BI solution. So reporting and charts and dashboards, the ability to set up speedometers and key performance indicators and metrics, things that are visually rich and appealing and help to convey message and meaning behind the data to the end user very, very quickly. We have a data warehousing component to us, and I know, we talked about the title for this being No More Data Warehouses, and I'm going to explain why we chose that title in a couple of slides here, but conceptually at the back end, we have something called the Indicee library, which has a lot of the same concepts as a data warehouse. Within that library framework, metadata layers to allow you to craft your data, extract, transform, and load, or ETL type components to help you massage and manipulate that data to get a good business face to it. Integration technologies, one of the things that we recognize is that organizations want to be able to embed our technology within their own, to plug our things into their portals, to be able to interact with the reports, the dashboards, the libraries, the data itself. And so we have a very strong integration story we tell here as well. And then, of course, a management layer that includes things like row and column level security, customization, configuration tools, and deployment tools. I mean, if you're building a solution with Indicee, you're often going to want to deploy that solution, whether it's internally in your company or externally to multiple different customers that you may work with or may be building these solutions for. So really there's sort of four cornerstones: the data visualization, data warehousing, integration, and management tools and technologies. These are really the basic building blocks of Indicee and the Indicee platform. Obviously today our focus is really going to be on data and how do we get the data in and how do people work with creating a data environment for the end users. How do we turn that raw data into information? And that's going to be the real focus here. So if people often ask me, well, you know, what is the basic concept behind Indicee? How does Indicee work? Well, it's simple. We are today in a situation where more and more people have more and more data. This continues to grow. This has been a problem, you know, for businesses for decades. We continue to be an information generation with the lowered cost of computing, the lowered cost of storage, and everything else. We continue to build data. Today's organizations have more data sources than ever before. They're not only using their internal homegrown databases, they're using, you know, on-premise, behind the firewall applications which have their own databases. And now, of course, we're introducing more and more cloud services applications and their associated databases and data streams as well. It becomes more and more challenging for people to make sense of that data. So how does Indicee work? Well, Indicee essentially allows you to send all that data to one or many Indicee data libraries, consolidate, organize, make sense of that data, and present it to the end users so that they can create reports and dashboards and begin to share them out with other people in the organization, whether that be internally with their own colleagues or different business groups, or externally with customers and partners as well. That really is Indicee in a nutshell. Take the data from multiple different sources, combine it, consolidate it inside of an Indicee data library, allow people to create reports and dashboards, and of course share them with other people in the organization. So those are sort of the cornerstones, you know, the main portions of a BI system and BI solution, and certainly the way we see Indicee functioning. The backbone of this is, of course, the Indicee library. It is an Indicee-designed data warehouse, and I use the term data warehouse because conceptually that's what people understand. You know, there are definitely certain key concepts about data warehousing that we support, and so you can think about Indicee. Very often people talk about the library as being a data warehouse or a data mart or multiple data marts, and so that's what we're going to focus on today, is understanding how that works and how to build one. This is where I sort of warn everybody on the call that this is a technical call, a technical discussion, and that Indicee library, as we designed it, was really meant for people that are perhaps business analysts. You know, if you've got a good understanding of the data and database concepts and business requirements, we built that library for you. If you're a DBA, database administrator, and you've got a great handle on how to do this stuff with other tools, then you'll really enjoy working with the Indicee library designer. If you're a developer, you want to integrate functionality into your application, exchange data with applications using Indicee, and build libraries that way, absolutely this kind of tool is for you. If database talk and hearing words like OLAP and OLTP and key fields and relationships and things like that are really foreign concepts to you, you know, this is probably not the session for yourself. But we want to make sure you understand that as we created the Indicee data library and the library designer and all the technologies behind it, we really focused on how can we make this available to more people? How can we take users that are not, you know, perhaps DBAs, and give them some ability to craft their own data and work with it? Every organization has business analysts, people that are data jockeys, that are smashing and crashing that data together in Excel every week. And absolutely, the library designer will be a tool that those type of people can use. Certainly want to stress, too, with an Indicee library that, as with any sort of data warehouse, you build it once, and then you continue to load data into it over time. Essentially, what we do is we create a library of information. As we continue to populate the Indicee library with data, we tend to create a very rich history of the organization, ability to analyze past events, match them up against, and look at how we might do in the future, that sort of idea. So why a library? Why would we call it a library? Why use a library? Well, remember that the act of consolidating that data together, the act of creating a data warehouse or a data mart or centralized location has a variety of key benefits. One is that it is absolutely centralized. So you're able to integrate data from multiple source systems. It gives you a central view across the enterprise. And it's especially valuable, too, in organizations that maybe have grown by merger and acquisition. You've got multiple different disparate data sources that you need to consolidate and give access to people all over the organization. It's organized and logical. When you create a data warehouse, when you create a data mart, a data library, what you're doing is bringing order to the chaos, stripping away the layers of complexity, defining what are business terms and terminology associated with that, so that more and more people can understand and get access to the data. And that's important, the fact that it is accessible. By putting your information in Indicee, in the cloud, in an Indicee library, you're creating a central point for information for everybody in the organization. Because this is a SaaS platform, there are no tools to install, no servers to maintain. Anybody with a browser can easily log in and start working with the system. We're talking about consolidating data, stripping away what are maybe the noisy details of the transactions associated with your daily use of systems, and this is really important. By consolidating that data, we can get a better overall picture of the organization, and we can make it faster, make it easier. A lot of people, wanting to get access to the system very quickly. And abstract and searchable. This is important. Restructure the data so that it makes sense to business users. Because frankly, if you're a technical person, you work with databases, you know that as we build databases, we don't build them to make sense for reporting. We build them to make sense for transaction processing. We build them to collect data from the web, to collect data from users, wherever that might be. So we want to be able to provide layers of abstraction on this so users understand the data. It has business context and terminology to it, beyond that which is in the database itself. And certainly as we start bringing together data from multiple systems, that's even more important, defining and deciding on common business terms and terminologies and usage that works for the organization every day. And ultimately, you do that, things become searchable. We can find what we're looking for very quickly and very easily. And lastly, of course, by centralizing that information, by organizing the information in one location and moving it off of your transactional systems, you're adding value to those operational systems. You're delivering better query performance. You're not negatively impacting your daily solutions, your transactional processing solutions, and that's important. So that's what an Indicee data library brings to the table. That's what a data warehouse brings to the table. The concepts and benefits of doing so are very readily realized by any enterprise, any organization. What the Indicee library also does is bring some new technologies to the forefront that really help it to sort of grow beyond the boundaries of what data warehousing has been for so many years, and that is sort of a walled garden approach. Everything goes in, it stays there, we can't get out, you can't do much with it beyond the boundaries of that wall. So an Indicee data library is made up of sort of snap together kind of pieces, composable BI, composable business intelligence. It doesn't require a monolithic processing like most typical traditional data warehouses do. If we change things, if we add data, if we update that warehouse, very often with other technologies, you have to sort of offline this stuff, process overnight, recalculate, reinvent, whatever it might be. With Indicee, you don't have to do that. Our architecture allows us to maintain a very fluid approach to working with the data and to updating the library over time. It's kind of like, if you think about it, it's like or the way we work is kind of like a manufacturing process. We understand where all the parts and pieces are. We understand where all the sub-assemblies and components are in the data. We understand how to stitch this stuff together based on the way people create reports. And the benefit of that is that we have no monolithic processing, that we can reassemble the pieces in real time when they're required because we know where they are. We know how they relate to one another. And behind all of this is really sort of an XML definition of how the data exists and where it exists and what the relationships are and how do we go and fetch, find, and assemble this stuff so that we can make changes in real time. We can implement something from within the library design that our end users can recognize and realize immediately. When data is added, it's there immediately. When a change is made to the structure or schema, it's available immediately. And because of our the separation of logical from physical architecture, we also can do things like mix and match multiple different types of data sets into data collections, different groups, if you will, or almost, some people talked about them maybe as being sub-libraries, but to logically organize the data in one or many different collections, to share it out to different users and have the data participate in different organizations of libraries. So very, very flexible. And change things on the fly, don't have to worry about sort of offlining these types of things. So let's talk about some of the simple facts about libraries. And when we start demonstrating this, or when I get in, if I have an opportunity to demonstrate building a library, we'll certainly illustrate these things. So all data in an Indicee system belongs to a library. When I, as a user of Indicee, I log in and create a library. Or sorry, I create a user account, I log in, I have a library. As a matter of fact, every Indicee user account has their own library by default. And they're private. So when I log in, I have a library, it's mine, nobody else sees it. Now, typically speaking, in most BI systems, most users don't need their own library. I mean, think about most people don't need their own database. One central database is the right way to go. One single version of the truth to re-quote the often hackneyed expression in BI. Most users will actually report from a shared data library. So usually in an organization, we have one person who's sort of the library administrator, like the old school database administrator. And then once the libraries are created and the collections are created on the library, we can then share those to groups, and users can report on the data by participating in the groups. So pretty simple concepts. Everybody gets a library, but frankly, most people will only ever report out of a shared library, and usually in an organization, it's only one user that creates or manages or maintains the data. An Indicee library is composed of data sets and collections. Something else called a contribution, but I'll get to that in a few minutes. The library manager, as we look through it, this is the primary screen for working within your library. It's what allows you to share data, upload data. It allows you to create the library, maintain and manage the library and all the data in there. It displays all of the data that's available really for the user for reporting. When I log into my system, I go to the library and I can see in that library all of the data that I will be able to access, whether I've created a library myself or whether other people have shared libraries to me. Everything I have access to will be in that library. And display some cursory metadata about it as well. Behind the scenes, the Indicee library is actually a hybrid OLAP model. And for those of you not familiar with the term, OLAP stands for Online Analytical Processing. It's the multidimensional version of traditional transaction OLTP databases, the online transaction processing databases that we associate with standard enterprise production systems. You'll often hear people refer to these OLAP databases as cubes. it's a nice way to sort of think about them. People tend to consider or think about multidimensional data in terms of this Rubik's Cube kind of puzzle you see in front of you, where not only do we have rows and columns of data like we would in any sort of spreadsheet or database, but we also have dimensions to that data, things that help to define or describe what the actual intersection of any particular row or column happens to be. And within that framework, we organize the data into things called measures and dimensions, and the intersection of them really start to represent specific facts about our business. So you can see within my diagram here, I've got information about apples and bananas and oranges. I have information about the different geographic regions in which they sell, and I have information about the time at which those sales were made. And so at any intersection of those 3 points, I can come up with a specific fact at a specific point in time about a specific sale of a product in a given region. If you've never seen an OLAP database or never considered multidimensional data, you might have played with an Excel pivot table. And conceptually, we have the same sort of idea going on as what will be in a pivot table. Now, what makes this a hybrid OLAP solution is we have some relational technologies in there as well. Indicee builds its cubes based on the definition of flattened row sets or relational source data sets. And by doing that, it gives us a great deal of flexibility in terms of how we build the solutions, how you can maintain the solutions. It makes it a lot easier to do. And then with the relational definition of that data, we then take a multidimensional approach to storing it and retrieving it and allowing you to calculate across it. So that's what gives us this sort of slice and dice of the data as well, the fact that it has multiple dimensions. And you often hear people saying, we slice and dice the data. Well, that's what it's all about. That's what OLAP is all about. By rotating a particular slice, if you will, of that virtual data cube, we get a different representation of the facts involved. So if we think about some of the concepts that we're going to put forward here for you, Indicee libraries, they organize data into what we call question terms or reporting terms, and we call those measures, subjects, and time terms. Subject, you'll often hear me refer to it as a dimension, or if you're typically used to other OLAP databases, you'll talk about them as dimensions. A subject is typically a broad classification. I often think about them in terms of nouns, people, place, and thing, that sort of idea. A broad classification, customers, products, countries, these types of things we might want to group our data by in order to get an answer or get some results. Time, similarly, is also a subject, but as far as the Indicee is concerned, it really is sort of has a special definition because we break it down into its representative components, quarters, months, days, hours, minutes, that sort of idea. And then a measure, well, a measure is the number. A measure is a specific fact, really, if you will, a specific value by which we want to measure the results, measure or count for the results. I sold 3 of X item on this particular date and time. So it's things like sales and quantities and weight. All of these are represented. So all the data really can be broken down into sort of these 3 types of items. Now, when we go to build a library in Indicee, we certainly want to take those concepts or keep those concepts in mind as we're doing it. We have 3 basic steps that are required in building the library. I'm going to expand on each one of these in a moment. But we start by defining what the source data looks like. So data sets are collections of information about a single topic. So we define that data. We tell Indicee, what does the inbound data look like? This is a spreadsheet. It's got 5 columns, 3 of them are text, that sort of idea. The next step, once we've done that and defined what those data sets look like, is really to map information in the data sets to fields that exist in the library, either creating new fields or mapping it into existing fields. 3 of my data sets have a customer ID, so we'll create a single field called customer ID to hold that information. And then thirdly, we use the fields to define the question terms, the business context and terminology that we use in creating our reports. The third step, the question term step, really defines what the end users are going to see when it goes to creating a report. And this is where we start to have those discussions, right? The business term that we use for customer ID is company. We use customer ID to define what we mean by company. So we're going to start to put some context and meaning around the data when we do that. The initial step of the data sets, getting data to Indicee, and we're going to talk about the actual transfer data to Indicee later on. Indicee will accept data from multiple different types of sources, spreadsheet files, text files. We can even read the data from Crystal Reports files. By creating a fairly narrow focus on the type of data that gets fed to Indicee, we simplify that connectivity. We reduce the playing field. You know, virtually any kind of application today, any kind of database today can produce its output as a CSV file, a tab-separated text file. Most production systems can export as an Excel file or even produce Crystal Report files. So by looking at creating, you know, common file formats for input and definition of data in Indicee, we really sort of narrow the focus, and we help to provide something that A, everybody can generate and create, and B, that gives us the flexibility and latitude to, you know, to be able to analyze virtually any kind of data from any system. So we look at the data sets as being flattened row sets. You know, absolutely, it's really a collection of information about a particular topic, if you will. And the first stage in building your data library is to define the data set. The data sets themselves, as I said, they tend to be a group of facts about a particular concept. All of my orders for today, transactional data set. It's usually in the OLAP world, we often think about that as being a fact table. You know, all of my customers. Well, here's information about my customers: their name, their phone number, their address, the key contacts, the customer ID, these things. So all of those things that really sort of belong to a particular concept. Very often, you know, as we're training people to use and build libraries, the feedback we get when we talk about data sets, and people say, oh, this is just kind of like a table in my database. And the answer is sure, absolutely. You know, if being able to sort of consider it in that fashion helps you in the design process, very, very important. So that first step really is to create what we call a signature in the library. Define what the data that's going to be imported into the library looks like. And as I said, you know, this is an Excel spreadsheet, and it has 5 columns, and 3 of the columns are text, and 2 of the columns are numbers, or maybe there's 6, and the 6th column is a date. If you've ever imported text into Excel, you'll see the little wizard pop up like the screenshot I've got below, and it is the similar kind of process. You know, what does the data look like that we're going to bring in? It's a really nice way to do it. We actually use the source data to help us define these libraries and define the data sets, because it really makes things an awful lot faster. You know, I don't have to sit down with some sort of modeling tool and type in the name of every column and figure out what it's, you know, how many characters it's going to be long, and is it text, and is it an it, all these things. We actually are able to read them directly out of your data, and it makes building the library a much faster process, a much more fluid process than, you know, what you would consider when building databases. The second step is creating fields. You know, we have to create what is the sort of the first usable object in the library, if you will, and that is a field. So any particular field describes a single exact kind of data. US dollar sales, a single exact kind of data. Customer ID, a single exact kind of data, something that we want to use later on to help define our subjects and other reporting tools. The data in the fields, when we create the fields and we map data from the columns in the data sets, we're mapping from one or more data columns in order to achieve data equivalence. So I may have 2 data sets, and in my examples I typically have a transaction file. It's got a customer ID in it, and I have a customer file. It has a customer ID in it, and what we do is we map those 2 different columns into a singular field in the library called customer ID. They have the same data equivalence, the same business meaning, and therefore we're only going to ever have one customer ID field in our library. The fields can have aggregate properties. It's a sum, it's a latest, it's a min, it's a max, it's an average. We have meta properties that we can tag them with, so descriptive properties to help find them later, to help describe them and explain them to the people building reports. And also, these fields can be expressed as a calculation. So can columns in your data set. I'll talk about those a little bit later on. I just didn't want to muddy the waters here. The third step is, you know, what we refer to as defining reporting terms. And this is how we define which of the fields in our library are going to be available and visible to users creating reports. It's where we add business meaning to those fields. and where we surface up a context that, once again, helps us deal with measures and subjects and time. Subjects are something you can often think about as groups or grouping. If I was going to build a report, how might I want to group and subgroup the data together? These are our subjects terms. Once again, then the measures are numbers. They are the numbers by which we measure our business. And then, of course, time, being the sort of a logical time scale against which we measure the different results. So 3 steps. Within that 3rd step, we also manage relationships. At some point, people tend to ask me, well, where do I do my joins? Where do I link my tables together? And it happens actually in the 3rd stage. This is where we manage the relationships and the data. And the reason it's managed in the 3rd stage is the Indicee engine, what we call our Indicee modeling platform and our Sprite stream processing engine. It actually uses all the evidence in your data to infer relationships. Everything that you designed in those 3 stages to be able to determine what the best relationships are. So it will actually develop relationships between all the different subject fields, or the different subject areas and terms that you've created based on all the evidence to date. Where is the data coming from? What fields has it been mapped to? What subject areas have you created for reporting in the system? And then once it's actually defined or determined all of those, you have the opportunity and the ability to add new ones, remove some that perhaps don't exist, or modify some of the relationships if our AI hasn't accurately detected what they might be. And that does happen because sometimes the data you load is really just sort of a minimal data set. It doesn't have a full year's history in it or things like that, and therefore we may not be able to glean all of the potential relationships. But this is where it is. When people ask me, how do I link the data? How do I link my tables together? This is where it happens, and it happens, through our own engine technology that it inspects and infers the relationships based on the evidence in your data. So I mentioned briefly as well in some of the initial steps, the defining data sets and creating fields, that you can also create calculations, and absolutely. So Indicee actually has a built-in calculation engine and formula language called the Indicee formula language. It is a common script for creating expressions or expressing calculations. It looks and behaves a little bit like Excel. Going back to some of the original personas and who might build one of these and who might use them. We wanted to make sure that people that were familiar with Excel were able to get a great deal of value out of Indicee. And we've enhanced it a little bit further on, so we can actually create some special syntax for things like let statements, assignment operators, if statements, and inspect and case kind of statements as well. So you can use the Indicee formula language to create new data set columns. So when we go back to that first step, defining what the columns of data look like in your data set, you might want to do some things like add a concatenated key in order to be able to relate the data to something later on. You may want to create some expressions like, sales is equal to quantity sold times price, so that you actually have a sales field in the database. Things that you can, perhaps calculate across a row in an Excel spreadsheet. Those would be calculated columns, and we can use the IFL to create those. Similarly, if we're going to create calculations, especially calculations that are perhaps more technical in nature, dealing with things like type 2 data for slowly changing dimensions. Those are created as calculated fields, and that gives us the ability to calculate amongst the fields in the library, which means that we can transcend multiple different data sets in doing so. Talk about testing your assumptions, and this is the one thing that I always find challenging in using other tools and technologies is I'm building something technical. I need to know, I need feedback along the way to let me determine that my assumptions are correct, that my calculations work, that my relationships are bound properly, things like that. And one of the things that's very unique about Indicee is you can actually launch the report design tool right inside your library design environment. And you remember I talked earlier about the how flexible the design of a library is, how we work with what we think about as snap together BI components and tools, so that everything is kind of available to us in real time. Well, as I'm building that library, I can instantly open up the report designer inside the library design environment and start testing my assumptions. Create reports in real time to make sure that what I'm building is giving me the right results. So there's no need for me to stop, save, exit, process all of my changes, go to another tool and open it up. I can do it all at once, do it in real time, and it saves a great amount of time. If you've been in BI for a while, you've used other tools and technologies, you know that business intelligence and the creation of the technologies behind the scenes and the access to the data, it's an iterative process. We go back to it again and again and again, and we massage and manipulate and tweak just to get it just the right way so that it makes sense to the end users. And this is a really, really important step in doing that. It just saves an awful lot of time when you're building these libraries. The other thing we need to do is think about the whole BI lifecycle, or the data lifecycle that exists. How do we manage that? Because your data, it sort of lives and breathes and grows with you over time, and it expands and contracts, and we add more, and we change our definitions, and more importantly, we change our business all the time. We change our business rules all the time to keep up with the market, and so we want to have a system that allows us to do that. With Indicee, we actually have created something called the information space. So these are essentially workspaces that have a library and the reports and the dashboards and everything you built associated with them. We allow you to create your own dev and test environments, to replicate your existing production environments into those ones, and then more importantly, go ahead and make changes in something that is not readily accessible to the user population. Do your testing, play around with it, come up with new architectures for your library, new additions for your library, and then when you are ready to have that go into production, be able to propagate the change, to be able to update your primary production model with all those changes and do it in real time. Again, no need to offline things and migrate and process. It is simply a matter of updating my current model with those changes. We also use the same infrastructure to be able to do things like deploy solutions to different customers as well. So you can actually manage a common production code for multiple different clients. So if you're a software company, if you're an ISV or a VAR that wants to build solutions and be able to deploy them for multiple different customers, and more importantly, manage those solutions over time, you can. The same information space environment will actually allow you to push completed solutions or push changes out to your customers. So let's imagine you've created a BI solution for doctor's offices, and your new product comes out this month. You've made some slight schema changes to the model that you're using for the reporting. You've added 3 new reports. You've tweaked 2 others, and you want to be able to give everybody that upgrades their software the upgraded version of your Indicee data library. And you can actually use information spaces to deploy those upgrades and do it with confidence that you're not going to destroy any users' custom reports and things like that they might have already built. So we want to make sure that end to end you can manage that data and information lifecycle throughout your organization. So it looks like we might have time for a little demo, which is great. What I wanted to talk about, and this is the question I get asked most of all, oh, Craig, you've just talked about text files. Is that it? Is that, what about how do I access my Microsoft Dynamics GP system? How do I get data out of my Salesforce.com system? What do I do? Now, most applications have some kind of export mechanism, some kind of API that you can tap into in order to generate data set files for Indicee. So you could, literally in your application go, click a button in that application, generate an export file, and then send that export file to Indicee. So there is a manual process for uploading files. Click here, choose the file, click upload, and that will push your data to Indicee. We also have a REST API that exposes virtually every part of our application to developers so that you can integrate this into your own apps portals, framework, whatever it might be. That API has something called the data contribution API, or that whole API set, and something we refer to as iBias. There's something called the data contribution API. That data contribution API is a REST API, is a Java library that allows you to push those files to Indicee. So they can be integrated within your application framework. They can be, integrated as part of a script you may be running on one of your servers to go ahead and do this. Run some sort of SQL process, an export that might generate a file. At the end of it, you can call one of these scripts to upload. So you can automate and script and embed that functionality into your app. And if you want to grow beyond those borders, if you want to sort of get into, rather than a push technology to Indicee, if you want to get into a fetch, or you want to get something that is scheduled, or has a robust workflow engine associated with it, gives you application integration, server kinds of capabilities. And we also have a partnership with Pervasive and their data cloud system. So their application integration service allows you, it has multiple different kinds of connectors to different applications, whether it be a connector to a Dynamics GP database or to your SFDC system, whatever it is. They have multiple different types of connectors that can reach through the firewall, can automatically execute queries, return data sets through that firewall directly into Indicee. We have an Indicee connector for the Pervasive Data Cloud. So if we want to go for a complete managed framework with robust workflow and the ability to sort of get inside that firewall and remotely execute queries to fetch the data, then absolutely we have that solution for you as well. And it's something we're not going to be demonstrating today, but if you want to have a look at how Data Cloud functions and how we use that, absolutely contact me after the presentation. We'll set something up for you. So, very, very short demonstration. This is the kind of thing that leaves people saying, oh, wait, what did you do there? Oh, can I? Well, I just want to sort of give you an idea, show you that this is actually a pretty simple process. So I'm going to log in my library demo system. This is an empty Indicee library. If I go to click on my data tab, you can see it just says, welcome to the Indicee library demo. There's nothing in there, no collections, no data sets. So I'm going to click the upload data button. And this is that manual process. Remember that we always like to sort of look at, how do we get data in? The first step in defining that data set is to actually send some data to Indicee. We want to look at and evaluate the data set in its context, the data in the data set itself. The first stage is defining some simple things. What do these columns look like? Are they numbers? Is it text? Is it a date? If it's a date, what kind of format is that date in so we can better conform to the data? Do we want to turn any of these columns off? I'm not interested in seeing PO data when I do my finished system. So I can evaluate it. We can get some simple data quality scores up at the top of here. We can add any extra properties or filtering that we might need to at this point in time. And this is when I move into mapping the data. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see I have represented the data set columns that we were looking at in the previous screen. On the right-hand side, on the blue side, we have the data library fields that are available that I can map into. And you can see there aren't any because it was empty to start with. And then below that line, we can see that Indicee has actually already automatically mapped a number of our columns into brand new data library fields. So this is what we're seeing here. There's a quantity of them that have been mapped for us. A couple that haven't, there's our order date. I'm going to select it from the columns on the left-hand side, and I'm going to click on Create a New Field on the right, and then click our Data Mapper button. And then unit price is something we also would like to have in here. We never brought that in the first place. And we talked about creating a calculation. I'm going to create a new calculated column, and I'm going to call it Total Sales. Very simply, total sales is represented as quantity times unit price. But this way I can actually pre-calculate the data in my data set and have it available to the library up front. So now there's my total sales column of data. I'm going to create a brand new field in my library to map it to called total sales, and we're done. We can see, as I mentioned, properties associated with this. Simple things. We can see by default it's a sum. If I want to, I can adjust some of those properties. It could be that I want to create a standard display format. I'll do it with a currency symbol in there. I can tag this. I can set its null value, null properties. But that's it. So I actually created a variety of fields in the library. If there were already fields in my library, I would have been able to map my data to them. And the next stage is to define that business context, if you will. If you remember, organized data allows us to actually apply some business logic in terms of naming and things like that to our data. A nice business face. I want to get my total sales calculated value up there and available for use. I have subject groupings already selected for customers, employees, orders, and products, and they're all based on the ID values. Of course, I could change the display if you want on these. Notice that it's already done things for me, like select the caption. I'm creating the group based on employee ID, and it's actually going to display the friendly name, which is employee name. So I actually might even want to rename the display name for that group called employees, because it's going to be a nice, friendly name for me. I'm going to bring in a time term here, order date. I'll select that and add it to my model. So now I'm able to group things by time. And I'm going to go ahead and click my Recheck Relationships button. And I'm going to have Indicee go ahead, once again, and inspect my data to infer the relationships. And there is enough information in my data at this point that it's actually been able to bring those back and actually set up the correct relationships for me. So customers, orders, employees, and products. And of course, I can preview my results because I can launch the report designer directly inside of my library design environment. And that means I can right off the bat say I want to see total sales. I'll just widen my column for the display screen. There it is. I want to group it by, well, maybe employees. That was my nice friendly name for that particular group. And you can see right away, in a very short amount of time, I've taken a singular data file, created something useful out of it. One of the things you will notice as well, if I try to group by customers, of course, the only information I have in there is customer ID. It's not a terribly friendly display. So the last thing I want to do is add another data set. So that's my first one. There's my product sales by employee. I might want to change it and call it transactions or something like that. But I'm going to go ahead and bring in my customers. And the same step, I've manually uploaded the file because I'm going to teach Indicee about what my data looks like. I'm just going to go ahead and accept the information presented to me. I might want to turn off things like address, and I might want to turn off postal code if I don't find them, they're all that interesting, and contact position. Matter of fact, just for sake of argument, I'll turn off several of these. Same steps. We defined what the columns are. We mapped the data to either new fields in the library or existing fields in the library. And what I wanted to show you here was it's mapped the customer ID field in my customers data set. It's mapped it to the customer ID column in my customers data set. It's mapped it to the existing field in my library because they have an identical data meaning and identical, in this case, a business meaning as well. Now, what it's already done for me as well is it's begun to flesh some things out. It's created some new subject areas for things like country, region, and city. If I wanted to create a drill-down hierarchy for these, I absolutely can. I can just nest them under one another. It's also gone ahead and already brought up customer name, or it's revamped that whole customer subject by adding customer name as the friendly caption for it. So I might want to rename my group now. It's friendlier. I'll call it customers. And if I recheck my relationships, it's probably created a few more of those for me as well. So very simply, and in a very short period of time, I've married together two different data sets. I can still look at my total sales information, as we did before. And I'll just widen my column to display it. But now when I do something like group by customers, we have the friendly name of the customers. But I also have additional information that has fleshed this out, because I might want to be able to group these by country, or I might want to group them by region, state, city, whatever it might be, even so far as to go ahead and reorganize those to get a better understanding of the data. So in a very short period of time, I created a workable or working usable library out of a couple of different data sets, and it didn't take that many steps. And it becomes, as I said, a very iterative process. So we can go back and we can reorganize and rename and work on these over a period of time. So I have a customer's data set. I might want to go back. I'm just going to go to my data set details and rename this data set, and I'm going to call it sales transactions. And say done. So I have a nice friendly name to it. And then if I want to share this with other groups, all I have to do is go ahead and create a collection for this. And I'll call the collection customer sales. I'll include both data sets. And it could be that I just want to include, I also want to create something called customer information, because I only want to share out just the details of the customers without their sales information to other members of the organization, and I can do that as well. So the library itself is flexible. It allows for you to create or to take data from multiple different sources, to define a schema, to set up relationships, to create business terminology on top of that data that helps end users understand and report off of it, and present it in a way that they can slice and dice it very quickly, very easily, without having to be all that technical. So that's an Indicee library. We would love to be able to teach you how to use them in greater detail. We have experienced partners and people internal to the organization that can help you to build these. We've got a lot of experience, so certainly if you're interested in us assisting you in building that kind of library, or training you to build libraries and using the tool, get a hold of me after the presentation. And I think somewhere on here, I'll bring up my email address for you. It's just craig@indicee.com or craigt@indicee.com. There's a variety. But to wrap, Indicee is a complete BI solution. It's cloud-based, rapid deployment, and immediate results. And I think what I hope to have demonstrated in showing you how the library works and talking about all the moving pieces is to say, yeah, it really is. You can get a system up and running very quickly and very easily, and people can start to get results from this right away. And it's not something that is, you know, a 6-month or an 18-month project with a whole army of BI consultants. We certainly want to avoid that for now and for the future. Really, really important. So once again, my email address, craigt@indicee.com. Our website is www.indicee.com. And if you want, all of our documentation, including links to some training videos, all of our APIs, code samples, our Java library, all of it available at dev.indicee.com. And what I'm going to do, we've got a couple of minutes here. I'm going to thank everybody for attending, and I'm going to just switch over to the question panel here and have a look. So if you do have any questions, go ahead and type them at this time. I'd be more than interested to have a look through them. And okay, one of the questions I do get all the time is really from people wanting to know more about, again, how do I get the data into Indicee? What is the general path? So once again, you know, 3 different ways that you can do this. First, manual steps, and we always start out with that manual step because that's how we first define the libraries itself. But you're going to load data over time. You know, once you define that data set, your next step is just to add more contributions. So every day your system's going to pop in another set of transactions, or every week, or whatever that might make sense to your organization. So if you're doing it in that fashion, you can continue to add new contributions of data manually. You can add them programmatically. And why don't I bring up just very quickly a little sample application that one of my developers has written for me, just to give you an indication. So this is just an in-house sort of skunkworks app that one of my developers put together for me so that I can get in and sort of more freely play around with some of the data in my system. And I can actually connect securely to my system. I can see the different data sets. So there's the ones we created. There's sales transactions. There's customer. This is all being done using our APIs. So again, this is not a commercially available application. But it gives you an idea in the steps. You know, all written with our APIs. I could go ahead, fetch it, and upload some new data sets if I wanted to. I can manage the different contributions here. I can delete them. I can download copies of them. All of this functionality is available to you via use of the API. So if I wanted to upload that customer file once again, okay, I've got a bad name in here. It will even also automatically provision new columns of data for me should I wish to do that. So if I upload a data set, it's changed somewhat, we need to add a new column of data to our library, all of that can be done in code. We can build the libraries from scratch in code. We can manage the inbound data sets, whether it be to add, update, or delete them. Whatever you've seen me demonstrate or discuss today, our APIs can actually help you achieve that. So hopefully that answered the question for you. Okay. Another question here asking just a little bit more information about Pervasive Data Cloud. Absolutely. I would encourage you. We just don't have enough time for me to go through all of it with you today. So we may do, we'll probably do another webinar in conjunction with Pervasive and get one of their experts on the line to talk through it with us. But in a sense, it's an application integration service. It allows you to set up source and target data sets or data destinations. So a source might be Salesforce.com. The destination is going to be Indicee. So Indicee actually has a connector that works with Data Cloud, so that we might want to say, okay, I need customer data from my Salesforce system, and I need sales transactions data from my Dynamics GP system. So I would basically be going and fetching a couple of different data sets, one from each source. So I would define what the source data is I want to collect. I can actually create the queries directly within Pervasive's Data Cloud, and once those are defined, I can then also basically define the movement of the data. When does it occur? And as it's moving, does it have to be scrubbed? Does it have to be joined with something else? Does it have to be transformed? So we can actually set up a very complex workflow, including notification services and transaction logging and everything else, ultimately to deliver that to my destination. And with their agent technology, it actually can reach right inside your firewall. So there'll be actually a corresponding app installed inside the firewall that can communicate with this. So, for an on-premise tool like Dynamics GP or something else, or Sage Mass 90 or any other technology, you'll be able to reach right in and grab the data sets there. And then what it will do is actually, based on your schedules or based on your workflow scripts, deliver that data to your Indicee library for your requirements. So that's it in a nutshell. Very robust, managed environment for being able to hook up to and connect to lots of different types of predefined data sources and services. So a lot of people say, well, do you have, what's your connector like for this Intuit product? What's your connector like for this Microsoft product? And all those different varieties of connectors are all available in Pervasive Data Cloud, and we can use them to hook directly into your data and execute the queries there. Okay, well, it looks like we are out of questions and out of time. I want to thank everybody for joining us again this morning, and hopefully it wasn't too technical or too dry for everybody. Encourage you, if you haven't already done so, create yourself an Indicee account. Contact me directly. I'd be happy to walk you through the whole concept and the whole idea behind building your data library. It doesn't take that long to do. It's an iterative process. It's something that we want to encourage everybody to get involved with, because we think it's easy. It's a lot easier than that traditional old-school data warehouse, and that is why we called it No More Data Warehouses. So thanks very much. Hope to see you on the third Thursday of every month. Take care, everybody.